Morning with Mike McDonald up in Seattle. As the Seahawks cruise past the Dolphins 24-3, they moved to 3-0, leading the NFC West in the Mike McDonald first year. No, we all have that on our bingo card. Coming up on the big show, we're going to talk to Adam Rittenberg from ESPN here in about 20 minutes. Talk some college football. We also got Chris Burkhardt from Rip City Radio. Get into a whole bunch of whatever we're going to get into in the second half. Could be college football, could be some video games, could be some 49ers, could be a whole lot else. So that's going to be exciting. And then TJ Mathewson from KJO Radio in Corvallis. To close it out, you got Rip City Mornings, Hour 1. And a happy Monday morning to you. Brendan Slaughter here for Rip City Morning, setting in for Justin Myers this morning. Extremely thrilled for another chance to hop on the mic and host for you guys and have y'all hear my takes uninterrupted. If you're a long time listener, you'll get that inside joke. But excited to be with you guys and check in on the weekend that was. And it was a big weekend for a lot of different reasons. But nevertheless, we got 3 great hours for you, as we mentioned. In the update, we got something for each hour for your listening audience's viewership today. 20 minutes, we're going to catch up with Adam Rittenberg from ESPN.com. We're going to get his thoughts on Oregon State taking out taking down Purdue. We're going to get his thoughts on Colorado and just the craziness that happened in that game this weekend. Also curious with a few other things like Michigan, USC, Oregon starting Big Ten play. So a lot to get into with Adam and maybe even put him in the hot seat a little bit and figure out what his thoughts are on the next teams for Pac-12 expansion. So that's coming up in about 20 minutes. But I want to go ahead and start here with the weekend itself. And for me personally, it was a drastically different weekend, folks. I mean, I think a lot of Oregon State supporters would feel the same way. It was a brutal Civil War week for Oregon State a week ago, and the vibes were not necessarily great, and there were a lot of question marks, despite the Beavers sitting at 2-1. So you bring in this matchup against Purdue, and Oregon State comes in as just a 2.5 favorite, and there's even still some worry, like, hey, if they don't win this game, are there questions that are going to be abound? Is Trent Bray need to do something with the defense? Is the offense not coming along? And I think all those kind of thoughts were quelled this weekend, and by far from a perfect performance, and we'll kind of get into the nitty-gritty of the Beavers a little bit later in the show with TJ Mathewson. But for Oregon State to bounce back against a Big Ten team, save me your Purdue's a lower-level Big Ten team. Purdue's good enough to still be in a big Power 4 conference. So regardless of that, to go out and win by 17, I think was a huge win for Oregon State, and I think it's going to give them a lot of momentum going into the bye week. And the way that their schedule breaks this year, they've got 4, 4, and 4, and to be sitting 3-1. We talked to Trent Bray post game, and we'll catch up with that audio a little bit later in the show as well. And he just kind of mentioned, would you like to be 4-0? Absolutely, but 3-1, you'll take it, considering that this was an Oregon State team that was gutted in the offseason and so on and so forth. So we'll get a little bit more into the Beavers as time goes along, but want to go ahead and get into Colorado as well here in a couple minutes, and I want to throw out that we'll open up the phone lines at 7:00 for some NFL and Pac-12 discussion. So keep an eye on that, 503-248-0620. You guys can join the conversation here on a Monday morning, and I hope everyone's enjoying a solid drive to work. Before we get into Colorado, which I think was probably the craziest just sequence of the weekend. Justin and I have mentioned Colorado's not our favorite team out there, and that's no secret. But at the same token, game respect game, and I've said for pretty steadfast, Deion's not my favorite guy, but Shedeur Sanders is extremely talented, and Travis Hunter is extremely talented, and some of those guys that they were able to come in have been upper echelon guys. Now, have you also had guys who maybe didn't belong at the Power 4 level? Absolutely. And I think that's where you've seen Colorado kind of go back and forth. And we'll kind of get into their big picture because they're sitting 3-1. And this is a team that when Dion got there was horrible. One of their last games they played before they hired Dion was coming out to Reser Stadium, and Oregon State kicked the dog out of them. And you just think about how downtrodden that situation was, and I think that's extremely telling. Just for the journey that he's been able to make. Say what you will about the whole I'm bringing Louis, I'm kicking out everybody on Colorado, I'm bringing in my own guys. It was unorthodox, right? But maybe now in today's world of college football, folks, unorthodox is the way to go. I mean, some people might say that, Oregon State and Washington State, quote, gutting the Pac 12 is a, unorthodox type thing. The way I look at that is, Oregon State and Washington State finally got proactive in what is a dog eat dog world. There ain't no trophies for being the, hey, we're still here keeping the conference alive. No, it's all about dollars and cents, folks. And I think, that's why you're seeing like Colorado. Why would Colorado be the media darlings that they become this year? Because Dion sells, right? So, that's been one of my criticisms, for Oregon State for the last couple of years is I think they could do more in terms of getting their brand out there for this exact reason. And I got to give them credit. It seems like in the last year that's taken a big step forward, but there for a handful of years, I really feel like it was, Oregon State being a very regional fan base compared to some of these other teams that were asked to go to the bigger conferences had more than just a regional fan base or had a more diehard regional fan base. So let's go ahead and listen to a couple of those Colorado clips. Then I want to throw in something fun from over the weekend that I got into. Great new TV show that I would highly recommend to everybody. But Colorado obviously gets the win in overtime, and what a matchup that was for Dion and co. Is that game was looking pretty much dead to rights, for lack of better terms, and somehow Colorado's able to make it all the way back. And we've got both of the clips from the Colorado side of the game-winning call, which was impressive, and then we have the Baylor reaction too. So let's go ahead and hear the positive Colorado version first, and then we'll let you guys start to think about just how Baylor felt in this matchup.
That ball come off his calf.
Playing the prevent end of the game defense.
Smartly trying to get a reroute and all rushing from one side.
The Big 12 opener comes down to this play. Sanders gets the feet set toward the end zone for the game. It is caught by Wister, just like 1994.
So that was the pandemonium on Colorado's side as they were able to complete the miraculous comeback. And again, Shedeur Sanders is able to launch that ball about 60 yards for that score. And again, I know there's been a lot of thoughts about, Shedeur Sanders and is he getting kind of propped up in the NFL draft discussion because of who his dad is. Take it from me. The dude can absolutely play. I've had my thoughts on his mental. I think that those children and those particular athletes who are kind of tailor-made to do whatever dad wants you to do, in this case, play quarterback. And I'm sure Dion has told Shedeur since he was about 8 years old that you are the greatest thing since sliced bread. So I think there will be some NFL teams that have some mental, concerns with Shedeur, but talent-wise, he can make every throw on the field, right? And just to show how frustrating it was that he could make every throw on the field, let's go ahead and hear the Baylor reaction. And for what it's worth, folks, this was a game that Baylor thought they had in hand, right? I mean, you're talking 24-17 at the half, and even that still is only a couple score lead, but the Bears felt really great about where this was. Safe to say their play-by-play reaction after the game, not so happy.
Gillick draws back the pass. He's airing it out. It's going to be long. No! No! Touchdown, Western.
Also joined by super producer Michael Shacker as well. When I hear that, it seems like the situation with Baylor seemed to escalate quickly, where they had to dial it down and not be quite as quite as open as they would have been for that play. Because I've been on the other end of those plays, just in my broadcasting career, where you're like, oh, this one looks good, only to have some sort of last-minute Hail Mary, what have you, that is just, absolutely, it's crazy, right? This is why we love college football, is, situations like this. And, the positive spin on this is that Colorado's 3-1. They're 1-0 in the Big 12. Baylor, who Justin and I talked about coming into the year, now sits 2-2. And, you've got a hot seat in Dave Aranda that's continuing to grow hotter. So that's going to be something also to keep an eye on. But as well, to close out, appreciate you guys spending the first segment with us. Coming up in about 20 minutes, we're going to be, or 10 minutes, excuse me, we're catching up with ESPN's Adam Rittenberg, talking a whole bunch of college football with him. But last thing I want to mention, too, because you know me, I always like to mention a little entertainment on this show. So amidst all the red zone yesterday and the college football on Saturday, I got a chance to watch one of the newest shows that got dropped on Max, The Penguin. And it's a spinoff of the Batman movie that came out a couple years ago, stars Colin Farrell. And after one episode, I must say, if anyone's kind of into that genre, and I know the superhero genre is not for my entire listening audience, but if you have any indication to get into kind of that, and you really liked, the Batman with Robert Pattinson a couple years ago, man, the first episode of The Penguin certainly hits. So I'm very excited to see what comes there. And you guys know me. I'm a TV snob. It's what I 100% do in my free time when I'm not covering the Beavers, working here at Rip City Radio. I love to consume television. And, I must say, after just one episode, I'm hooked. And if there are any definite Batman or comic book stands out there who are looking for a new show to watch, would highly recommend The Penguin on Netflix. So, or excuse me, on Max. Can't be promoting the wrong streamers these days, Brendan. They're all all these streamers nowadays are so unique to each other. You got to make sure to prop the right one. But the Penguin on Max. So we're gonna go ahead and take a quick break here coming up, and in about 6 minutes we're gonna catch up with Adam Rittenberg. We've got a whole lot to talk to him about. Obviously, the Colorado madness he was tweeting during that game. And I got to ask him, like, we've given Dion a good amount of, flack these first couple seasons. Is it safe to say that Dion is maybe deserving of some more respect than we're giving him? So we'll talk that. I also want to get his thoughts on the Beavers' win over Purdue, talk some Michigan, USC, and most importantly, I want to get his thoughts on where the Pac-12 is going to go. Right now, obviously, they sit at those 6 teams. Need to get to 8. That scuttlebutt continues to kind of move quite a bit. So we need to catch up with a whole bunch of stuff from our good friend Adam Rittenberg, going to be on the show. Coming up shortly, you've got Hour 1, Rip City Mornings with Brendan Slaughter. Welcoming you back into Rip City Mornings on a Monday. Brendan Slaughter with you here, joining you guys, talking some college football here on a Monday. Pleased to have on our next guest, Adam Rittenberg, ESPN senior college football writer. Adam, what's going on, my man? How are you?
I'm doing well. Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Appreciate getting a chance to talk to you, Adam. Usually, to give the folks a little taste behind the curtain, it's usually me reaching out to you to talk to our host. So when I got the opportunity to host myself today, I'm like, I got to talk to Adam. Got to talk to Adam. You were my first text message, man. I'm glad it worked out, and super happy to have you on, man.
Oh, you bet. No, it's great. It's a fun time of year. I feel like, we've had some weekends with just a few great matchups, but that's going to change here soon with obviously Alabama, Georgia this week, but then October, you look at the schedule, there's some incredible plays around the country. So exciting time of year for sure.
Oh, without a doubt. And we got to start here because you talked about exciting. I was keeping up on your Twitter feed a little bit over the weekend. You've seen a lot of college football, Adam. Where does that Colorado game rank for you and just the mind, bogglingness of it? Just I was obviously at Reser Stadium on Saturday night covering Oregon State Purdue and was kind of just keeping tabs with that game. But when I saw the highlights, I was like, my goodness, just take me through how that sequence came to be.
Right. Well, normally a team only has, one bite at the Hail Mary apple, so to speak. But Colorado had two. They had a play right before the one that was successful where Will Shepherd, who's a really good receiver, got behind the defense and had a chance to catch the ball and unfortunately didn't make the play. But then once again, they were able to execute on that final play of regulation. And I know, Baylor did not execute how it was drawn up, the coverage that they had. They actually did the right thing in terms of flushing Shadur Sanders to his left, which is what you want to do with a right-handed quarterback. But, their rushers, I guess, were in the opposite places, Dave Aranda said after the game, and that allowed him to throw it up there. And, they kind of used Travis Hunter as a decoy, and then Wester was able to, kind of sneak in between the two defenders and slide to catch the ball, which is just an incredible play all around. And then, obviously in overtime, Travis Hunter, that looked like a sure touchdown when that play started, and he's able to jar the and they storm the field, and then they review it, and then they obviously confirm it. So, great win for Colorado. Again, this is still not a great team, but they have some great players. Certainly, Shadur Sanders and Travis Hunter, two of the better players in college football. And I would give them credit. They seem to be playing a little cleaner the last couple of games, Colorado State and Baylor, even though they were very close to losing that game. So now let's see if they can, turn that into something that's sustainable. Because last year, they were a 3-1 team and things kind of fell apart on them. I know that they're hopeful that this year is a different story, but they'll be tested this week going down to face a very good UCF team in Orlando.
Catching up with Adam Rittenberg from ESPN.com. I think we have to start to look at this a little bit in a bigger picture, Adam. And like you said, I still don't expect Colorado to be, world beaters this year. I think, potentially flirting with that 6 win, maybe a little bit more if things break right. But the Big 12 schedule, as you mentioned, is tough. But considering the rebuilds that we've seen, right, and obviously Deion was aided by the transfer portal, and that's a whole new way. But, just here locally, we've seen Jonathan Smith need 3-4 years to get, Oregon State, who I would compare. I think Oregon State, when Jonathan Smith got there, and Colorado, when Deion got there, were both levels of just horribleness. And I think, you kind of have to give some credit to just how quickly he has at least flipped the narrative of being just a doormat. Does that kind of make sense?
It does. And I think, there's certainly some talent upgrades that were made on that team. That was not a very good team at all before he got there. I would say this, though, rarely at the Power 4 or Power 5 formerly level do you stay at 1-11. Most teams do get better. It's how much you get better. And that's why this year I think is really important, because if they don't build on last year, I think people are going to be skeptical about how much of an impact this really is. Whereas, Jonathan built that team, which I agree was a whole program was in a horrible position before he got there, into one that was, ranked in the top 15 for a good chunk of last year and flirting with the top 10. And Colorado hasn't gotten there, at least late in the season, but let's see if they can, build on, a win that was fortunate, quite frankly, against Baylor? And, are they able to now turn that Baylor? And, are they able to now
Catching up here with Adam Rittenberg. Sorry about that, Adam. I think we had a little bit of a technology flub there. But moving on to our next point, I'm curious your thoughts on this Michigan USC game. One of the more surprising scores that I had this weekend, obviously. Lincoln Riley seemed to have found something out with Miller Moss. I mean, obviously, Michigan's able to get the win, but does Michigan kind of have a quarterback problem? And, I think a lot of the narrative here early on's been, well, Jim Harbaugh's gone. Jim Harbaugh's gone. Is it a bigger deal that J.J. McCarthy's not there anymore, Adam?
It is. I think it's a bigger deal that they thought they could get by without adding from the portal. And, maybe believing too much in what you had rather than bringing somebody in from the outside who could at least compete. And really do it all because, I think, Davis Warren starts the first few games and he's a capable enough passer, but the 3 turnovers against Arkansas State led to a quarterback switch, and then Alex Orji gets in there and kind of does what we thought Alex Orji was, which is a tremendous athlete, can run the ball. He was used at times as a running quarterback last year for a play or two behind J.J. McCarthy, but had major questions about his passing ability, and those were not answered even in the win against a USC. So those are going to be out there going forward. Now, it may not matter if they can run the ball like they did and create enough power with their offensive line. I mean, that looked much more like the Michigan offensive lines that we've seen the last 3 years against the Trojans, who have been pretty stout in their defense but had too many breakdowns. And that was what Lincoln Riley said after the game, is that on most plays defensively they won, but they did not win the critical plays, and that's why they lost the game. And Michigan, I think that's a hard way to live every Big Ten game going forward, to expect a few breakdowns in the run defense and the fits and all that. And if they don't find a passing game, I think it's going to be hard for them to approach their success here recently.
No, absolutely. And I think when you look at some of USC was just the first, but a very difficult schedule for Michigan. And, for lack of better terms, they're still the hunted rather than, being hunted. So I think, being the reigning national champion, they're obviously going to get everybody's best shot. And appreciate your time, Adam. Just a couple more questions for you. Appreciate Adam Rittenberg from ESPN joining us here on Rip City Mornings on a Monday. Let's go out west a little bit, Adam. Talk a little bit about Washington State. Obviously, the premier Pac-2 team, Pac-6, whatever you want to call it. We'll get into that in a minute, too. But they're sitting at 4-0. Do you think that if they didn't need an overtime game over San Jose State, they would have cracked the top 25, sitting at number 26 right now? Or do you still think it's an uphill climb for both they and the Beavers in terms of that national perception?
Well, I would hope that eventually, especially if they're able to beat a Boise State team that did make the top. I mean, Washington State's literally right outside. So Washington State was the top team receiving votes that didn't make the top 25 and playing a ranked team now this week on the road in Boise State. So you would think, especially because there's a likelihood that teams that are, in that, 15 to 25 range, someone else is going to lose. I mean, Louisville and Notre Dame play each other. That's 15 versus 16. Someone's going to fall out of the top 25. So I would imagine if voters are doing their homework that Washington State will make it in. But, yeah, I think that perception will be interesting because if they're able to beat Boise State on the road, that's essentially a road win against Washington. I know it was neutral site technically, but that's going to Seattle to beat the Huskies. To me, that's a road win. And then you go on the road to beat Boise State, and then even the win against San Jose State might end up being solid. So it's really about what those other victories do for Washington State's overall profile. But, man, they beat Boise State with 2 weeks off to then play a pretty solid Fresno State team on the road. That's a good season. And I know they don't have a whole lot else left on their schedule to really help themselves, other than maybe the Oregon State game, the week before Thanksgiving. But that's a very solid profile for Jake Dickert's team, and ideally one that should get them at least some consideration for top bowl games this year. I know that's not everything, but it's still something that would mean a lot to, I know, Washington State players, coaches, and fans.
Oh, 100%. I mean, it's true, Adam. Being an Oregon State grad myself, I do feel like we're kind of hand in hand married with Washington State, and it's one of those things where I think you have to adjust expectations, and I think there are a lot of Oregon State and Washington State fans who would be very happy with remaining relevant as far as winning 7, 8, 9 games a year, and as you mentioned, with kind of the schedule that they're approaching the next couple years. You don't really see why that wouldn't be a possibility if things can continue. Speaking of the Beavs, Adam, obviously Purdue's a team that's pretty close to you. They had to make quite the journey out to Corvallis. It was their 7th longest road trip in their illustrious Boilermaker history. So just to show how long it's been since Purdue has come out west, and just in general, Oregon State hadn't had a Eastern time zone team in Reser Stadium in 14 years. So with that being said, obviously we know Purdue is not going to be world beaters in the Big Ten this season. But Adam, you know enough to know about where Oregon State's situation is at the end of offseason into now. This is still a significant win to beat a Big Ten team and crush the spread, is it not?
Yeah, no, I think especially coming off of the Oregon loss, which was, difficult for the Beavs, especially in that second half when Oregon really turned it on. So for them to return from that and be once again at home and really never be in doubt of losing that game. I never thought that Purdue was going to win. That's a good response by Trent Bray's team, and now they're 3-1 and they're halfway to bowl eligibility, and I fully expect them to get there. And you look at the upcoming schedule, winnable game after an open week against Colorado State. And then going to Nevada, it's also a winnable game. And then you have maybe the biggest game of the season, other than Oregon, would be UNLV. If UNLV continues on its trajectory, that's a team that's very much in the mix for a college football playoff spot. They already have 2 wins against Big 12 opponents. They'll have faced Syracuse at home before that Oregon State game, so they really might be the it team as far as outside of the Power Four. And then Oregon State has a chance to possibly, deliver their first loss. So that's an exciting opportunity. Then you go, face Cal and it's a ACC. I almost said Pac-12 ACC opponent. So there's some nice games here for Oregon State. Honestly, you look at Oregon State's remaining schedule and you look at Washington State's remaining schedule. There are a lot more, reputation building opportunities for Oregon State than Washington State. Certainly needed to beat Purdue. That's not a good team. It's a team picked last in the Big Ten. They took care of their business. Now can they continue that again against teams that they should beat heading into that UNLV clash on October 19th?
Yeah, you mentioned that UNLV clash. Couple things we'll get to with UNLV before we close you out. Again, Adam Rittenberg, ESPN senior college football writer. If you're not following him on X, you got to. He's one of the best in the business. Appreciate your time again, Adam. Just a couple more things for you before we let you go. Along those same lines, again, you were kind of you knew what it was like this last year when whether again you believe reports as they are, we've all kind of heard that Oregon State players may have known about Jonathan Smith's departure ahead of the game against Oregon, and that may have played a part in that game. And then Jonathan Smith is on a plane the next morning. If you were to kind of flash back then and then flash forward now, is this like a best case scenario for Oregon State, considering that they've got momentum? They're 3-1. They have a schedule. They have teams. Because you remember as well as anybody, Adam, there were times last year where it was, what's going to happen to Oregon State and Washington State?
No, for sure. I mean, I think the real excitement isn't really around what's happened immediately after Jonathan left, because it wasn't a secret. I mean, I fully expected around November 10th that Jonathan Smith was going to be the Michigan State coach. It was very much a more than a rumor. Among
the worst kept secret, right?
Yeah, it was going to happen. But the thing that you didn't know was what was going to happen to the Pac-12 or the Pac-2, and now we know that this is a conference that has added 4 new members and will likely add more members this week or very, very soon thereafter, and consolidate a new league that's positioned to compete for a college football playoff spot. And That's how Oregon State fans need to look at it. Could they have made the playoff in the existing Pac-12? Sure, it's possible. Once if everything had worked out perfectly, could they compete for a playoff spot on a regular basis in the newly constituted Pac-12? Absolutely, and that's really exciting because a lot of programs around the country are not going to be in that position, even though they're getting more money and it's going to be easier for them to sustain their athletic. I mean, I'm not minimizing the damage of the original Pac-12 dissolving and what that's going to do for Oregon State on a global scale going forward. But just from a football perspective, you have a coach who wants to be there, you have a good staff, and you have a schedule that's manageable and winnable and still exciting for your fans that could ultimately lead in the future to a college football playoff berth. And that's about as good as you can hope for if you're an Oregon State fan.
Absolutely. Catching up with Adam Rittenberg, ESPN senior college football writer. Just got a couple more things for you, Adam. Again, appreciate your time here on a Monday. Know you had a busy weekend as well. You mentioned that. I'm curious your take on the on the new teams coming into the pack. I mean, I think Boise's pretty self-explanatory as far as they've got a brand, right? I mean, Adam, you could probably go to someone in North Carolina and show them a picture of Boise State's field. They go, oh, the blue. Right. So it is a brand nationally. So I get that. And Fresno State, same kind of thing, always been successful in football. You've had some top quarterback picks. You've had Devontae Adams, Derek Carr, the Cars, I should say. And even San Diego State, really consistent. What's the draw with Colorado State?
Yeah, it's a fair point. I think it's a place that has underachieved. But has put money into their program, and they're certainly within a larger market there in Denver. But yeah, if you're going to judge Colorado State by on-field results, that's why are they part of this group? They have not delivered on the field, and it doesn't appear that they're going to do that this season either. But you go to their stadium, you go to their campus. They have invested in football, they've invested in their athletics. And there's potential there. So I think that was probably the reason why they were part of the group, and that's why it's still harder for fans maybe to understand that it's not just about results. It's about how that program is set up, where they're located, what their alumni base is like, what their booster base is like, how much they bring in from a rating standpoint. Those are all data points that the Pac-12 considered in including them, but. Yeah, I would say of the ones that were added, just from a performance standpoint, they're by far the weakest. I mean, they have not been a consistently relevant program since Sonny Lubick was there, and that was a long time ago. Mike Bobo, we thought would maybe get it going, didn't happen. He was let go. I thought Jay Norvell, especially coming from another Mountain West program where he'd had success, was going to work out. Hasn't worked out so far. They may be looking for a new coach. So I'm sure it's frustrating for their fans and their donors because it's not like they haven't tried. It's a beautiful stadium. That stadium's nicer than, even some Power 4 stadiums I go to. But it just hasn't happened for whatever reason.
No, you're absolutely right. I distinctly remember, Adam, there was a game that Oregon State opened Colorado State at that stadium back in 2017, and Oregon State fans will forget that result. As I think it was one of the biggest wins, maybe the biggest win of the Mike Bobo era to that point. Just last thing for you here, Adam, before we let you go, and again, appreciate your time. Kind of along those lines, there have been the college football realignment noise. I mean, you could almost, Adam, it's not like we get paid to do so. I feel like there almost should be a role created for just scan through Twitter and determine which of these rumors have any kind of legs, because it seems like there's something new every day. But nevertheless, we do know the Pac-12 is going to need a few more, if not a couple more teams to get up to that eight mark. I think from what I've heard, the reason that UNLV was not added in the first round was some hiccups trying to separate them and Nevada. They're kind of my top choice to kind of get into that Vegas market. Who are some other teams that you think would just, on the surface, just be intriguing to the Pac-12?
Yeah, I think then you have to go east. I mean, you clearly have a presence in that, mountain time zone towards the West Coast, with San Diego State obviously in the league now, Fresno State in the league. So now you look at, I think, existing teams in the American. And, you had Jeff Traylor, the UTSA coach, even on his radio show, discussing the possibility or likelihood of UTSA going to the new Pac-12, or Memphis is a team that I remember going down to Memphis in 2015 when Justin Fuente was still there and doing a story on, hey, is Memphis going to get ready to go to the Big 12? It just hasn't happened for Memphis and probably won't happen for Memphis for the Big 12. Why not go after them and sell them on the possibility that gets you in much closer to SEC territory and a new recruiting area? Do you look at Tulane, being in New Orleans? South Florida. I mean, there's all sorts of possibilities now that conferences are all coast to coast pretty much. Or at least the Big Ten is, and the ACC is, and the Big 12 pretty much is. Why not just explore all of the top options out of the AAC and see who you can add? In addition, I think if you're going back to the Mountain West, UNLV is the obvious choice. Although let's also remember UNLV's history is horrendous. I mean,
this is
football,
true.
they are one of the worst FBS programs historically in football that you can find out. And, yes, Barry Odom is doing a great job, and they made the Mountain West Championship game last year. And who knows, they make the playoff this year. The chances of Barry Odom being at UNLV next year are like 10%. So that program but most likely is under a new coach. We'll see if they can sustain. So that's just something that people need to consider, because you can be a prisoner of the moment. Colorado State sucks. UNLV is awesome. You look historically, and that's not true. So those are all things that the Pac-12 has to consider as far as this next bite at the apple, which, again, I believe will include teams from the Americas.
No, there's some great points there, Adam. And again, people can't forget that the UNLV Running Rebels were pretty terrible for a long time. I think it's that Allegiant Stadium just has quite the draw to it, Adam. And I think you see a lot of fans who are like, hey, a trip to Vegas every other year? That could work. So it definitely is going to be interesting to watch. Adam, took up too much of your time. I appreciate you so much the Monday after a big college football weekend. You have a good rest of your day, my man. I appreciate you, and we'll talk soon.
Sounds good. Thanks for having me again.
Welcoming you back into Rip City Mornings here on a Monday. Brendan Slaughter filling in for Justin Myers. Happy to be joining and spending my Monday afternoon, or Monday morning, I should say, with you guys. Hope everyone in the car is having a good trip to work, and hope that everyone tuning in is excited to get back into the swing of things. So we still got a whole lot to cover here in the next few minutes before we break and get to the second hour. Big shout out to Adam Rittenberg. Some awesome stuff from the senior college football writer over at ESPN, talking some Beavs, talking some Cougs, the future of what the conference could be like, and a whole bunch else. So you make sure to check that out at ripcityradio.com, as we'll have that podcasted shortly after the show today. Real quick, this segment, we're going to hear from Oregon State head coach Trent Bray, his post-game press conference from Saturday night as Oregon State took down Purdue 38-21. We just heard from Adam Rittenberg last segment. Save me the Purdue's going to be terrible. Purdue was a Power 4 team against a team in Oregon State that, for lack of better terms, was left for dead in the whole conference realignment thing. So that doesn't necessarily mean that one team is going to be worse or better than the other, but it's a reality when you're talking about athletes you can recruit and athletes you can recruit in the trenches, NIL resources, what have you. So, Oregon State's able to get a convincing win over the Boilermakers. Adam talked about how big that was for them going into the bye week. So, let's go ahead and hear Trent Bray's press conference from Saturday night. It's about a 5-minute clip here from Bray, and kind of hear his thoughts as the Beavers enter the bye week 3-1.
A complete win as far as I think early on the defense kept us in it. They had some big stops, turnovers in the red zone that kept us in it, and then the offense got rolling. So very happy with the team effort. There's things, definitely we can't let them run the ball like that, but very happy with the effort, the way they responded. It was just a good game for us.
Trent, what do you like most about what you got from your defense today, especially kind of those first two Purdue drives?
Yeah, I think they did exactly what we asked. We tightened down our coverage. They challenged everything they did, and early on it showed up with results on the football. So I was happy, especially early, with how we played.
Coach, when we talked to Isaiah Chisholm earlier in the week, he talked about the linebackers wanting to get their swag back. Just kind of wanted to ask your perspective on that, and if you felt like they were real swaggy out there.
I'll have to watch the film, but yeah, they were flying around. There's going to be stuff that I'm not going to like. That happens every week, but yeah, they're flying around again. Young players that are getting better every week.
Coach, Darius didn't play a ton, but had the big moment there towards the end of the first half. Just how would you assess, how he played and what he brought tonight?
Yeah, he did what we like about him. He made some big plays, made some big catches. We kind of, there's a progression to him coming back, right? Not just burning them out the first one. So I was happy with the production we got out of him tonight, especially for him being out so long.
Yeah, that was what I was going to ask next. Is it sort of a ramp-up thing for him, or are you going to slowly work him into more stuff as you move?
Oh, absolutely. As he continues to, produce.
Mm-hmm. You talked about how much the defense kept you guys.
Oh, sorry.
You talked about how much the defense kept you guys in it early. How much do you feel like the offense feed off of the defense, like you said, when they're flying around like that?
Yeah, I think when the defense is playing like that, there's definitely no panic out of the offense when drives don't get points. I think that's a big part of playing good defense is you let the offense continue to operate and work the way we want it to. And a big part of what we do is we wear people down. And the defense keeping us in allowed us to play that style of game.
You got a lot of success tonight out of that option attack with Giovanni. Was there something you saw in the Purdue defense, or just the way Giovanni's been progressing? What led to such reliance on that tonight?
Yeah, there was definitely an attack on what they did schematically, but also Giovanni does a great job with it. He made some nice reads on that and some big plays. I thought he did a great job. He pitched it when he was supposed to pitch it. He took it up the field when he was supposed to. I thought he did a really nice job at that point.
Trent, we talked last week about, wanting some more explosive plays in the offense today, and, kind of going along with what Joe said about, it seemed like Darius kind of helped in that regard. It seemed like there was a bit more with the jet sweeps and kind of just bigger chunk plays offensively. Was that a priority this week?
Yeah, we're always trying to look at how we can create explosives. We like the 11-play, 8-minute drives, especially at the end of the half, but we don't want to have to live with that every single time we touch the ball. So we're always looking at what's the best way to attack a defense to try to create those.
you talked at the beginning of the week about just going back to the fundamentals. Gunny just talked about going back to the basics, making sure you guys really clean it up. But what, off the field, what maybe characteristics, maybe the sort of mental, emotional standpoint, do you feel like the team really had to fix after such a tough loss to come out tonight and perform the way they did on both sides of the ball?
The thing that impressed me about them, even right after last week's game, was no one hung their head when we were talking after the game. They're very mature about handling their business. They're very good about taking criticism and using it constructively. And so I think that, from a mental standpoint, the ability for young people to do that is impressive, and they did a nice job with that, and I think that's why the game looked like it did tonight.
It seemed like Giovanni back there seems a lot more comfortable, and sort of building up his confidence. How do you feel like his progression has come, and where do you feel like he is right now?
Yeah, I said it last week, I'll say it again. I think he's just continuing to get better every week. He's taken a step forward every single week that we played. So he just keeps doing that. But I like where he's at, and I like what he's doing for us.
Through 4 weeks now, what do you feel like you've learned from this team? Obviously, you have to watch the tape from today, but through 4 weeks, what do you feel like you've learned so far about the team?
Well, big one, we got a big-time running game. I've learned that. We are capable of playing shutdown defense. We got to should have closed it out tonight, wish we would have, but we are capable of doing that against big-time talent, and then the resiliency of our players. Their ability.
That was Oregon State head coach Trent Bray. Got about half that interview. We'll go ahead and be catching back up with that full interview in the show to come. You've got hours 2 and 3 of Rip City Mornings with Brendan Slaughter sitting in for Justin Myers here on 620 Rip City Radio. 7 a.m. on a Monday morning. Brendan Slaughter with you for Rip City Mornings. The Oregon State Beavers bounced back against Purdue on Saturday night, winning 38-21 and improving to 3-1 entering the bye. This is how one of the biggest plays of the night sounded from your voice, Mike Parker.
And now Purdue with its second possession, beginning at its own 27. 1st and 10, 7:44 to go in the first. Hudson Card, the Texan transfer, swings it under the right flat, batted it into the air, and taking it to the house for an interception and touchdown, Zakai Saez. Zakai Saez batted the ball up in the left flat and takes it to the house for 6.
Big call from friend of the program, Doc Parker, definitely ignited the Reser Stadium crowd on Saturday night as they took down Purdue 38-21. Oregon, meanwhile, was idle this week and will travel to UCLA to kick off Big Ten play this weekend. Seattle continues to have something strong brewing with Mike McDonald as the Seahawks cruise past the Dolphins to move to 3-0. Coming up on the big show, we got Chris Burkhart from Rip City Radio, TJ Matthewson from KJO, right here, Rip City Mornings. And welcoming you back into Rip City Mornings, Brendan Slaughter filling in for Justin Myers here on a Monday morning. Appreciate you guys joining me. Got Mike Shacker producing things, keeping the Rip City Radio crew rolling here on a Monday morning. Lots to get into today. Got to go ahead and give a quick shout out to Adam Rittenberg in the first hour. He covered so many different topics as far as Oregon State, National College Football. So definitely make sure to check out that interview at ripcityradio.com after the game. And definitely want to go ahead and open up the phone lines too, 503-248-0620. You got thoughts on Pac-12, thoughts on expansion, heck, even some NFL thoughts from over the weekend, which we're going to get into here shortly. Make sure to drop us a dial, 503-248-0620. We'll try to get to you before Chris Burkhart joins the crew in 20 minutes. Excited to get the Butcher and the Slaughter back together. Chris and I got a whole lot to talk about. There's going to be at least one segment where y'all have to put up with Chris and I talking about the college football video game. So just preparing you for that. But there's going to be lots of great bits of information catching up with Burke. So very excited for that. But let's go ahead and take a look over at the NFL. Again, we can talk NFL if anyone's wants to join the conversation, 503-248-0620. You know, there were quite a lot of surprising scores in the NFL and a few key injuries and things along those lines. Before we get into the scores, there was something that I wanted to settle into and something that was very local for us here. And that was Los Angeles Chargers quarterback Justin Herbert. You know, coming into the week, there were concerns about his high ankle sprain that he suffered last week. And it was something that I mentioned to Justin on Tuesday when we had our NFL discussion. He took some big shots. You know, he took a shot to the arm, then obviously had a high ankle sprain that came out of it. And I was shocked to see that the Chargers ended up going with him out there on Saturday simply for the fact that high ankle sprains are tough. I mean, we've learned about this now in college football and basketball and in any sport where you got the high ankle sprain. Most doctors will tell you this. If you have a high ankle sprain, the only way that is going to improve is to not play and elevate it for about 2-3 weeks. Now, again, Justin Herbert played through the ankle sprain yesterday afternoon in their 20-10 loss to the Steelers. Somewhere Justin's smiling. But, I look at that result and for Jim Harbaugh, maybe it's a situation where, your backup quarterback and situation is just that much of a drop-off that you're like, hey, we're going to go out there. But you talk about a guy in Justin Herbert, one of the most talented players to ever come out of this state. Shout out the 541. And, he's a franchise quarterback. And I just have concerns year one of the Jim Harbaugh experience, throwing out Justin Herbert, who may be a little limpy, a little this. I mean, I get that they were 2-1 going into this game, and I'm not going to bet against Jim Harbaugh. You look at what he did with the San Francisco 49ers the first year he got there, having them competitive and in the playoffs. Chargers playing a pretty tough division. I think that could be a stretch. But that being said, I just don't know if you want to sacrifice the future for the now And with a guy like Justin Herbert, who's already dealt with some season-ending injuries a time or two, I just don't think you take that risk. I mean, we know Jim Harbaugh is all go, no quit. And, I just wonder if that was obviously more of a, medical staffs are going to make the correct medical decisions and all that. I just wonder if this was a case where the coach maybe needed to go to Justin and be like, hey, Justin, this is a game we need to take care of you, need to keep you safe. Now, at the same token, I completely understand the faction of fans who are like, Justin Herbert's a max quarterback. Max quarterbacks are on the field to help them win for a certain reason. So it's kind of both-sided about that. But again, it was just something that caught my eye looking at Herbert and how, he still is going to be dealing with something moving forward. And the bigger picture, like I said, high ankle sprains have a tendency to last. It's not like even if they gave him a week off of practice, it would make a difference. So I think ultimately it's going to be very interesting to see how long that lingers for Justin Herbert. Is it half the season? Is it the majority of the season? So that's definitely going to be something to keep an eye on as well. Speaking of injuries, man, talk about a bad couple weeks in Miami. I've made no qualms on this show with you guys. I love Miami Dolphins quarterback coach Mike McDaniel. I think he's, for lack of better terms, one of the smartest football nerds out there, and I say that with all due love and respect as a self-described football nerd myself and TV nerd and many other things. But he's just so good at being able to get his players in space. You can tell he comes from that Kyle Shanahan coaching tree. But that all being said, he's got some quarterback problems because not only did Tua Tagovailoa get his fourth concussion here a week ago, and his football future is in doubt. He said he wants to come back and play, but as far as the legality of it is with NFL and concussions, it's going to be a minute before he can come back, or better yet, do the Dolphins welcome him back and all those things. So a lot of moving pieces with Tua. That being said, I'd be shocked if he doesn't play. Whether it's for the Dolphins or someone else remains to be seen. But nevertheless, the Dolphins got their absolute teeth kicked in Seattle yesterday. And when you're talking about second-string quarterback Skylar Thompson, who was already kind of a stretch to begin with as a backup going in to face the Hawks' nest and that 12th man, and then he gets dinged up, and now they're down to Tim Boyle and Pac-12 legend Tyler Huntley, the Utah alum. So Miami, a team that I was really excited for coming into the year. I mean, you had Tua, you had Tyreek Hill, you had Jalen Waddle, you had a solid offensive line, you had three great running backs in Devon Achane, Raheem Mostert, and Jeff Wilson Jr. And, the pieces were there. Even defensively, the pieces were there. But now you're seeing, the injuries take their toll. And they're far from alone. We'll be talking to Chris Burkhardt here in a couple minutes. And I'm not sure a team has been hit harder by injuries than the San Francisco 49ers this season. That was, their continued just unluckiness in that regard. And then, you add that unluckiness to, dropping a game to the Rams yesterday. The Rams obviously were undefeated or hadn't won a game coming into that matchup. And now the 49ers sit 1-2. And if you would have asked me before the season started who lock stop, outside of the Chiefs, of course, because Patrick Mahomes is the next Tom Brady and is going to do all that, I would have said that the 49ers would be right there in the mix to be in the Super Bowl again. But yet the NFL these first couple weeks has proven to be very fickle and pretty interesting when you say all the way about it. And, just kind of a few last points, odds and ends with the scores over the weekend. Some other surprising scores, I was after absolutely blowing past the competition in the NFL the last couple weeks. The New Orleans Saints and Derek Carr came back to earth this last weekend. They led the NFL 40-some points per game, and it really looked like, hey, maybe we got, the second coming of Drew Brees here. Philadelphia Eagles come into New Orleans, get that win and in close fashion at 15-12. And that was the first time I think I saw the New Orleans Saints really be limited this year. So that's something to keep in mind. Other scores and notes. So some surprising teams. The Minnesota Vikings checking in at 3-0 as we currently stand. The Green Bay Packers have won 2 games without Jordan Love, which is surprising in itself. The Denver Broncos, our very own Chad Doing, got to be pleased with Bo Nix yesterday. Absolutely getting it done against Baker Mayfield down in Tampa. We mentioned the Seahawks. And then perhaps my personal favorite is before this season began, I sat here and made a great analogy to Moneyball. And it should surprise none of you. Justin and I love our references on this show, and I'll be honest in saying that I'm responsible for a whole large portion of them, whether it be The Office, whether it be Moneyball, whether it be Draft Day. Oh, such a good movie. It's the scene in Moneyball when Billy Bean's getting there, Jonah Hill's getting there. They're just kind of starting to get their bearings in Oakland. And Philip Seymour Hoffman, playing Art Howe, the manager of the Oakland Athletics at the time, wants to talk to Billy before they go in and kind of discuss the game plan and kind of breaking down their board of players. And there's this, very poignant line from Philip Seymour Hoffman, who is like, it's really hard to coach under the cloud of a one-year contract. It means the same thing to a coach as it means to a player. There's not a lot of faith there. So let's wind the clocks back a year and, a little less than a year. And after Dallas flamed out in the playoffs again, as they do, as I'm sure they will do this year, and I'd probably put money on that, Jerry Jones, Cowboys principal owner and essentially God within the organization, came out and said, well, at the end of the day, Mike McCarthy is still our guy. We're not going to give him an extension. This is his last year, and we'll see, how the chips fall. That being said, there were also some big player extensions coming up, too. They ended up since signing Dak, signing CeeDee, signing Micah Parsons. But the fact that the Cowboys sit 1-2, 0-2 at home, to go 0-2 in Jerry's world, this has Mike McCarthy's swan song and pink slip written all over it. We'll see what happens. Ultimately, NFL's a long season. A lot of things can happen. But this was my hot take coming into the year. I thought the Cowboys, for all the talent they have, I love CeeDee Lamb. I love my guy Brandon Cooks, Beaver alum, man. There are some really good players there in Dallas. But I sometimes think you can't quite overcome mediocre coaching. And that's something that Green Bay found out the hard way and was like, yeah, we're done with this Mike McCarthy experience. I think he's just a so-so coach. I think he can win you a lot of games the regular season. But that one Super Bowl looking to be pretty long ago at this point. So it's kind of interesting how we look at these coaches with one Super Bowl. And I think when you kind of compare him to, someone like Sean McVay or someone like John Harbaugh, it feels very, very different. So we'll go ahead and take a quick break here on Rip City Mornings. Coming up, we're going to be catching up with the Butcher, Chris Burkhardt, going to be joining the morning crew after, and also hosting Rip City Drive this afternoon. So a busy day for Burkhardt and pulling some double duty. So I appreciate catching up with him. You've got Rip City Mornings, hour 2 on a Monday. Welcoming you back into Rip City Mornings. Brendan Slaughter with you. Appreciate you guys joining the show as I'm filling in for Justin Myers here about halfway through the big morning show. Appreciate everyone listening in their cars, their devices, wherever you get the iHeartRadio app. We are pleased to catch up with you. And I am pleased to catch up with a good friend of mine, just jack of all trades at Rip City Radio. I didn't know if I could give you a specific title, Chris, other than just jack of all trades, because you do everything. Chris, what's going on, my man? Good to catch up with you.
Oh, that's pretty much my job title wherever I work. I don't know if that's a good or a bad thing, but it works for me.
Well, see, this is, Chris, you love college football as well as I. You and I are paying back the scheduling equivalent of a home and home right now. You asked me to come on with you guys, Rip City Drive, last week, and I was like, well, Chris, we can't have this be one-sided. We got to get the home and home here. You got to join me. And let's take a look behind the curtains, and I want pure honesty with you. I know you are a dad, got a family man and everything. If you didn't have kids, would you be up at 7:20 in the morning?
Well, yeah, because I usually have to be to the OSA office early in the morning. But work out of the question, Brendan. There is no chance in hell I'm waking up this early if it wasn't for children. I'm a sleeper, man.
Hey, man, I'm the same way. And as I think we've gotten into year 4 of mornings, our good boss and friend Chad Dewing, when I first started doing mornings and radio, he gave me the greatest piece of advice that there was, Chris. He said, mornings, they have their perks, man. It's awesome. You just have no social life. And as time has gone on, it's like, yeah, it's definitely always fun to tell your friends, hey, I'm headed to bed about 8 o'clock, but, nevertheless, wouldn't trade being here and talking to you for just about anything this morning. Because, Chris, for the first time, you and I get to hear our uninterrupted takes, which is a big deal when Butcher and Slaughter comes to the fray, man. So I'm excited to talk to you.
Yeah, it does. It does matter to get those takes, and I'm just like, I'm more questioning, Brendan, why Justin and Chad, because I'm hosting this afternoon.
Yeah.
Why are they both taking a day off after a weekend of football? It blows my mind.
Those higher ups, man, it's hard to say, right? Must be on a little bit of a better vacation package than you and I. No, I'm just kidding. I think, it's Chris, the way that I like to look at that in life is in one of my steadfast rules is quid pro quo. So it's like you and I clearly doing some favors this week. I'm headed down to Reno for Oregon State's game in a couple weeks, and one hand will wash the other in that regard. So you got to give a little to get a little. But let's go ahead and dive into a couple things I want to hit on with you, man. Appreciate you jumping on this morning. First of all, again, we don't talk about it enough in the morning because you and I haven't worked mornings together in a minute. But Butcher and Slaughter back again. This is the one time I'm going to mention it before we get into our stuff. We need to get into this, buddy. People are starting to tell their friends, and it is a growing movement.
Yes, it is a good movement. I mean, even Shacker texted me to make sure I was up. Said, "Hey, wake up! You're getting slaughtered in 20 minutes." I was like, "Man, this guy's name is just perfect for radio." Yeah, and then the Butcher is like my secret identity. It's like Bruce Wayne and Batman. I'm only the Butcher when I'm around you, just because our names make too much sense, man. It is. It's a movement. People need to get behind it.
It's beautiful, man. It's beautiful. We keep getting stuff like this. Maybe that will happen. But it's good to have you on back today, buddy. We're going to cover a whole hodgepodge of topics today. I want to talk a little Oregon State over Purdue. We got to talk Deion in Colorado and a couple NFL things too. I know you might be collectively groaning, but we got to figure out. And let's start here, Chris. What is going on with your Niners besides a swath of injuries? Because outside of Tom Brady 2.0, who is undefeated, and I very much expect to be back in the Super Bowl again, the 49ers were my pick, and they still would be if healthy. Have you seen a Niner team this injured this early in the season since you've been, you've obviously been a fan for a long time? Where does this rank in that regard?
It feels like it's pretty high, right? I mean, but also I think it's just the gravity of the injuries, right? I mean, it's the NFL. There's always injuries. You're always dealing with them. But when you have the two most unique, like 5-tool weapons, if you will, in the NFL, and Christian McCaffrey and Deebo Samuel, and you lose both of them, I mean, it's like trying to drive down the freeway with, out two front tires. You're just sparking everywhere, and that rear wheel drive's only going to get you so far, right? So it is just kind of crazy. Purdy hasn't looked terrible. There's still his naysayers, and I don't know why he continues to play good football. But you have Brandon Ayuk, who missed all of camp because of the contract stuff. You have no Deebo, no Christian McCaffrey. Like that stuff hurts. George Kittle is still good, but George Kittle is also not the George Kittle of 3 or 4 years ago. There's been that tight end fall off, right? So you don't have the weapons, and the defense is good, but not as good as it was, a year or two ago. I think they're still trying to work through some stuff. You got to remember, Brendan. I mean, that defense has had talent, but over the last few years, they've lost. They've lost Ryans. They've lost Robert Saleh. They've lost really, really good coaches, right? So there's a lot of moving parts there with that success, but the biggest one is obviously those injuries. So when you lose Deebo and CMC, man, it's going to be a tough go no matter who you are.
Chris, I'm curious with that too because I just speaking out of pocket. Do you play fantasy football?
Yes, I have one team because I'm not paying attention to 20 teams and rooting against myself. I know too many people, Brendan, who are like, oh, man, I really need Purdy to throw a touchdown here for my one league, but the guy I'm playing in my other league has him, so I didn't know. That's too much. Just one team, my man.
100%. Yeah, I'm the same way. I've been that way. Back in college, I got a couple guys who are like, you need to have like 3 teams. And I'm like, okay, I'm either going to draft all the same players or I'm not going to do this kind of a thing so I can watch guys consistently. But like, Christian McCaffrey was pretty consensus the number 1 pick in fantasy. And again, I know this is a very niche conversation, Chris, but just how big is it that like fantasy bros have to be feeling pretty bad these first couple weeks with some of the big time injuries that we've seen?
Hey, you know what? What you do, it's fantasy, Brendan. You have him on your roster, hoping you can get through the first few weeks. He comes back from IR, you're good to go. And when you limp into your fantasy league playoffs, you have a healthy Christian McCaffrey. That's what you hope. Just like the Niners hope that happens in real life. Sometimes you got to risk it for the biscuit, as they say. And taking CMC high, definitely a risk with that injury history.
Oh, without a doubt. And I'm curious, too, is there anybody long-term for the Niners, or do you think they will eventually get these guys back and be able to make the push? Because, again, I don't want to rain on Seahawk fans' parade because I'm also, very conscientious of where we are. And you got to give DAP and got to give credit. They're 3-0. They've gotten a couple good wins. But if you had asked me going into the season, I would have expected them to be third in that division behind San Francisco and then some combination of Arizona or Los Angeles, whoever ended up being better this year. And again, I feel like the uniforms are just magic, but like, how far can Geno Smith really take you, Chris?
I think Geno will take you to your destination. He'll take you where you want to go. But, when you get there, you're going on vacation. You might not be staying at the Ritz-Carlton, right? You might be staying at a Motel 6. That's my analogy for I don't think they're going to the Super Bowl, okay, my friend? They are the Seahawks. There's something magical about them. I had this conversation with Dwight last week asking him, what is it? Like, they're just always consistent. They're always out there putting up wins, and they're getting early season wins, which matter right now when teams like the Rams struggled out the gate. The Niners have struggled out of the gate. But at the end of the day, I don't think – if the 49ers or the Rams are healthy, I don't think the Seahawks are beating either of those teams because the Rams are full of talent, and obviously the Niners are as well. They just got a lot of kinks to work out. But you got to give credit to the Seahawks and that organization for taking advantage of the situation and rolling out the gates to a quick 3-0 record and finding ways to win, man. That's what Geno is all about. That's why he's such a good story, right? People sleep on this guy everywhere he goes, and here he is in Seattle, found himself a little bit of a groove, and they're putting wins together. They deserve a ton of credit, and he's a big reason for that.
Absolutely. And again, you talk about just the skill position talent. You know, you've got talent at receiver. I know he's been out right now, but you got Kenny Walker. Zach Charbonnet's shown some good things. And then defensively, you know, it's unfair to compare anybody to what they had. But you look at John Schneider, he's built in kind of a Legion of Boom light. I mean, you're talking about some of the dudes they got back in that secondary. It is impressive. And I think, you know, you go back to Mike McDonald being the defensive head coach that he is, and I definitely think there's a sentiment that the Seahawks could be one of those surprise teams this year. So definitely something to watch out for. And I'll say this: I was surprised because I was a Pete Carroll guy, Chris. I mean, I was all in with Pete. Like it was like Dana Altman for the longest time making the postseason. It was death, taxes, and Oregon basketball in there. And I felt the same way with Pete Carroll. Maybe not a Super Bowl, but it was death, taxes. Seahawks are going to be in the Super Bowl. Maybe even, or excuse me, going to be in the playoffs. Maybe even hosting a playoff game. So I'm very curious to kind of see how the full season ultimately fleshes itself out. Before we get into a few more big topics, and again, big shout out to Chris Butcher Burkhardt joining me on this edition of Rip City Mornings, filling in for Justin Myers. Let's have a little fun, Chris. Give me the latest. Where are you year-wise in your dynasty? I'm not sure I want to reveal mine because I think it might show my lack of social life. But I'm just kind of curious. What are some of your highlights of the game so far? Because I feel like a fool, Chris. I pre-ordered Madden and college football so I could get the deluxe edition, and then at that point, Madden was a throw-in for like $30. Chris, I have not opened Madden.
Well, that's probably the wise play because I haven't turned up. I got yelled at because I'm a PC gamer, but yeah, obviously the game came out on console, so I bought it on the Xbox, which we have one in the house, and I have been yelled at by my daughter multiple times. Dad, why are you playing my Xbox? That's my
Dad stuff.
Xbox.
I love it.
I'm like, well, you're doing chores and homework, and you're not even playing your Xbox right now. Okay. Now, if the question that you ask is it's going to sound weird because it's going to sound like I haven't been playing this game because I'm in like year one of my dynasty. But that's just because I got bored with all my other ones. I got through like 5 years as the head coach of Ole Miss and got bored with that. And then I went to Oklahoma State, started a new one, and I started a bunch of them to try to mess with, my little how do I want to be a recruiter? Do I want to be a motivator? What do I want to do? I went to Oklahoma State. That was bored. I haven't dove in and done a dynasty with Oregon yet because their team is too stacked in the game, and I'm like, that's just boring. I don't want to automatically get the best recruiting class in the game and have the best quarterback and receivers. Nope, I don't want to do that. I did advance and win the Pac-12 championship last night with Oregon State on my Heisman difficulty
there it is.
dynasty. They are a 2-loss team, and now we got Florida State in the Rose Bowl. Just get excited about that, okay? And then I have another one, Brendan, with a group of friends where I was App State and won the national championship with App State in their user league. Then I have another one where I'm Miami, and I also won the national championship. So watch out for me. You put me in your league, you're going to lose national championships.
Oh man, that is just music to my ears. There is more than one way to slice a tomato, and I think there's a better reference, Chris. But I don't know if it's still appropriate, so we're gonna skip it this time. But I'm just curious, because to your point, I embarrassingly have still not created a road to glory. Which, if you had told me that 2-ish months ago, I would have said, what's going on with Brendan? But it's because I have been so obsessed with my dynasty. Chris, I have essentially ran past Nick Saban as far as video game numbers go. Won a couple natties at Oregon State, started there, went to Notre Dame, won some natties there. Now I've settled in at UCLA and have some natties there. I think we're 2040 last time I looked, so we've got some distance starting to move, and I'm kind of curious too. I'm sure there have been people with mods, Chris, like Will it go like beyond 2,100, or does it say at 2,099? Yeah, you're just done as a coach.
Yeah, they're gonna force you to retire because you're too good. Be careful.
Oh gosh, good stuff. But again, Chris and I's love of that game holds no bounds, and I've known Chris for Chris, how long we known each other now? 10 years, something like that, give or take.
Yeah. Close to that, yeah.
Yeah, and I remember one of the first things we were able to talk about was our love for this college football video game, and even then when we got to work together more at Rip City Radio, just hearing how excited we were for this was certainly something to talk about. But a couple more things, Chris, non-video game, real sports related. I want to get your take on. You were at Reser Stadium last week. You, obviously being an Oregon grad, were probably very thrilled with the outcome, but still. You understand the perspective of a Beaver fan more than most, and I think can come at it with an objective angle, maybe more so of an objective angle than the host of this program from time to time. But, it was a starkly different atmosphere at Reser Stadium. Oregon State bounces back and get the win against Purdue. Terrible Big Ten team. Don't no qualms about that. They're probably going to finish last in the Big 12 or in the Big Ten. But for Oregon State, Chris, a quasi-Mountain West team and a Pac team built with Mountain West teams, it's still an impressive win when you're favored by 2 to win by 17, yeah?
Yes, it is, Brendan. And here's the thing about Purdue being bad. Like, if you go in and you beat a Big 12 team that's a good Big 12 team, oh, yeah, look at that. They stood with the big boys. You go and beat Purdue, and then people try to throw it in your face. Oh, well, they're the worst team in the conference. Okay, well, we're beating the worst team in the conference still matters because why? Because all this conference realignment, everyone has been telling you, specifically as an Oregon State fan and supporter of that program who has been left out, that the Big 12, the Big 10, the SEC, the ACC are the only conferences that matter, right? That's what they've been telling us. So if you go and beat the worst team in the Big 10, or you go and beat the worst team in the SEC, you all of a sudden can't say, oh, well, they're a bad team. Well, they're good enough to be in this conference that doesn't want me. Right? So you put that feather in your cap and you show it off. And Purdue, as bad as they are, that's the type of team, if they're in a big conference like that, you don't want to sleepwalk through that game because they're going to find a way to beat you. And so I watched this game, Brendan. I saw what happened at the war, saw that one firsthand, and Oregon just kind of walloped Oregon State. Oregon State played good for quarter and a half, and then the talent and the size, everything outran them. And so then you look at the week after that, and how does a team who again had to deal with this offseason that no program wants to deal with, losing a conference, losing a coach, losing a ton of talent at all your key positions to the transfer portal, how does that team and Trent Bray bounce back? Doesn't matter who you're playing. How do you bounce back? And I thought they bounced back in a big way because not only did they win that game, Brendan, they dominated it. Every single facet of that game, they did what they wanted to do, played the game that they wanted, and got back to their winning ways. So I don't care that it was against a bad Purdue team because, again, if you're telling us those conferences are the best, we just took one down, and that means something.
No, and I 100% agree with you. And like I said, there were a lot of, just noise coming from various angles, not only the fan base, but just college football people in general. Oh, well, it's Purdue. Of course you're supposed to take care of them. Chris, I think considering how, and maybe I'm being a bit dramatic, I don't think in my lifetime, and again, that spans 28 years, I don't want the old school Oregon State fans to come at me. Worst time in program history is when you didn't go to a bowl game for 20 some odd years. Point blank, period. Worst time that I had ever seen in my life was the Gary Anderson experience and all that. And I'm sure he's still, enjoying his very nice retirement with very many schools having taken care of him financially. But, as far as like Oregon State being left for dead, Chris, which I feel like they really were, sitting 3-1 with three games you were supposed to win and the one game you weren't supposed to, I think from that perspective, you got to feel pretty good as a Beaver fan.
I think you do. I definitely think you do because again, you were not asked out on a second date and you had to deal with that. And how did you respond, man? And I think that Coach Bray has done a great job of trying to give this team an identity and forging their way through this. And now you get this little bit of a light at the end of the tunnel, right? Because you got teams coming in. The Pac-12 is going to, resurrect from the ashes, and you were there. You were the flag bearer, just you in Washington State. And you got through this, and you had to find an identity. And I think Bray's done that, man. I think the bounce back was huge. I mean, look at what Washington State did this weekend, Brendan. They played their rivalry game same time that Oregon State did. They upset the Huskies, who were in the national title game a season ago, and then they go on a home game against San Jose on Saturday, and they almost coug it. They almost coug it.
Oh man, the term was almost brought back, man. It really was.
Like they almost let you down, and at that point you're like, okay, what's the win over Washington mean when we can't take care of San Jose State at home? Like these are teams that that they haven't been added to your conference, so that's the type of team that you're looking to add, and you can't get through them. But again, Oregon State does the opposite, loses to their rival, and you could eat everything that has been handed to Oregon State and dropped on the city of Corvallis over the last calendar year. You could have easily folded and said, okay, this hill's too high to climb. And Trent Bray, I think, definitely said, no, dude, it's one game. You move on, you get to the next, you take care of business, and they did. So this is a team that, I mean, they considering the fact, Brendan, that you lost so much talent at key positions, that Damian Martinez is wearing a Hurricane jersey, that Aiden Childs, who was supposed to be kind of the future of that quarterback position, is now at Michigan State with the coach who shall not be named for, you Beaver fans. all that stuff. And here is Trent Bray winning the games that this team should win with less talent than they had last year, arguably. No disrespect, but I mean, anytime you lose a Damian Martinez, you lost running back depth, no matter who you're starting. Like, the guy's phenomenal, right? So the fact that they're out there taking care of business and they're winning games, and dude, you should absolutely be excited if you're an Oregon State fan. Are you going to lose some games down the road? Yeah, you might. But the fact that you have kind of weathered this storm and everything's kind of looking up for you in the conference moving forward, that's a big win to me, Brendan. That's a huge win. And yeah, Trent Bray, boy howdy, does he deserve a ton of credit for what he's done over the last few months.
No doubt. And you mentioned the storms, Chris, as we'll go ahead and wrap up there. I wouldn't doubt, and again, not to be too much into a parable, but yeah, there was probably a few Beaver fans who were like, man, the rain started? Are the locusts coming? Are we sure we're not going to, have smoke? It was a tough spot. But again, Chris, appreciate you so much jumping on, man. Always happy to do the same for you. Go have a good rest of your morning. Have a great show with Dwight this afternoon. We'll talk soon, buddy.
Yes, man. Not a problem. I appreciate it. We'll talk to you later.
All righty, welcoming you back into Rip City Mornings. Brendan Slaughter with you here, bottom of the 7 o'clock hour. Joining you guys. Big shout out to Chris Burkhardt, who was able to join us here in the last hour. And, I also have to big shout out to Adam Rittenberg for joining us in the first hour as well. Lots of great conversations. And third hour, we're going to catch up from TJ Mathewson, talk some Oregon State Beavers. He's my partner in crime down in Corvallis. Works with 1240 Joe Radio, Mike Parker, John Warren. Great guy, and excited to catch up with him. But we got a few minutes here before we got to break and get back to the top of the 8 o'clock hour. Joel Klatt, college football analyst, someone that I had a pretty good amount of respect for. Always really liked his takes, but I'm about ready to go scorched earth on Joel Klatt for a minute because he had a take very casually in a game between Ohio State and Marshall this weekend that just seemed to rub me the wrong way. So let's go ahead and hear what Joel Klatt had to say during this game.
Rough one for Q's last night. Stanford going up on the road, getting that win, and the classic ACC battle of Stanford and Syracuse.
Stanford, new member of the ACC after the Pac-12. Saw teams leave the conference. Pac-12 still alive, though. They're getting ready to retool it with Oregon State and Washington State leading the way. James Peoples on the run.
I almost said something I probably shouldn't have.
What were you going to say?
I was just like, they're expanding. It's going to be like generic. It's like generic medication.
So that was Joel Klatt talking about, or rather throwing shade at the Pac-12 and their expansion. So first of all, Joel Klatt, you can kick rocks. It must be nice to be where you are and be covering, a team that was part of, be a part of a situation where it did not affect you or your school whatsoever and what's to speak. And on the other side of the equation, I think he's flat wrong. I think it's a terrible take, and I think it's one that got roasted on awful announcing and roasted correctly because, Joel, I don't know how much time you spend out here on the West Coast. I'm going to be willing to bet not a ton, and, it's one of those things where you look at the teams, and we're going to go rapid fire here. Okay, we just talked about Adam Rittenberg. Boise, okay, that's a brand. There's not anyone in the country who couldn't recognize that blue turf. Fresno State, couple top picks. David Carr, Derek Carr, Devontae Adams. Ever heard of that guy? Great football tradition there at Fresno. Colorado State, got your issues. Adam and I talked about that. It is what it is. But, then you add in San Diego State. Kawhi Leonard, anybody? This is just the narrative that it's going to be generic. Will it be different? Sure. But let me ask you, folks listening in the car ride right now, when you're at Costco or you're at your local grocery store and you're looking at Advil versus the Kroger brand Advil, the Safeway brand Advil, and it's $5, $6 cheaper, I'd love to know how many of you are actually going for the generic Advil as opposed to being like, yeah, I can rock with the store brand. So save me on the generics and all that stuff. And I think the teams that he can bring in are would be even more. You going to complain about UNLV, Joel Klatt? That's Vegas. You going to complain about Memphis? That's one of the top college football fan bases. So I think this was a terrible take. And like Joel said in the moment, probably should have kept his mouth shut because his foot kind of got in his mouth with that one. You've got Hour 3 Rip City Mornings coming up. We're going to do a reset, top of the hour, catch up with TJ Mathewson. Then Michael Shacker's going to ask me some hot seat mailbag questions. You got RCM, Hour 3 coming up. 8 a.m. on a Monday. Brendan Slaughter with you for Rip City Mornings. The Oregon State Beavers bounced back against Purdue on Saturday night, winning 38-21 and improving to 3-1 entering the bye week. Here's how it sounded from Mike Parker with Zakiya Saez, arguably the play of the game.
And now Purdue with its second possession, beginning at its own 27. 1st and 10, 7:44 to go in the first. Hudson Card, the Texan transfer, swings it under the right. Batted it into the air and taking it to the house for an interception and touchdown, Zakiya Saez. Zakiya Saez batted the ball up in the left flat and takes it to the house for 6.
One of the craziest plays you will ever see in a college football game gave Oregon State the momentum they needed to take down the Boilermakers. Oregon, meanwhile, was idle and will travel to face UCLA to kick off Big Ten play this weekend. Seattle continues to have something strong brewing with Mike McDonald as the Hawks cruise past the Dolphins 24-3 to move to 3-0, leading the NFC West. Coming up here in about 20 minutes, we're going to catch up with TJ Mathewson from KJO Radio in Corvallis. Talk some Beavs. Welcoming you back into Rip City Mornings. 8 o'clock, final hour of damage to do here on the Big Monday show. Big shout out to Michael Checker helping produce as the crew is a little bit lighter this week with Justin Myers and Chad doing out of town, but nevertheless got an awesome day. Appreciate Chris Burkhardt who joined me last hour. If you want to hear more of Burke, catch him in the afternoon as he'll be hosting with Dwight Janes on the Rip City Drive this afternoon. And once again, definitely excited to be with you guys here. Thrilled for my final hour to hop on the mic and have you all hear my uninterrupted takes. So it's definitely going to be a fun hour, and I'm really looking forward to catching up with TJ Mathewson. This last hour, we got a chance to listen to the Joel Klatt clip. And I just want to listen to it one more time because we kind of ran up against it. Joel Klatt, college football analyst, threw out kind of a jab at the Pac-12, and I kind of want to have a little bit more of a discussion with this. We'll also quickly hear from Trent Bray before audio that we played back in the first hour, entering the conversation with TJ Mathewson as the Beavers enter their bye week. But let's go ahead and listen to that Joel Klatt clip again as he's talking about the Pac-12 and the news that the Pac-12 had expanded with Boise State, San Diego State, Fresno State, and Colorado State. Let's check it in.
Rough one for 'Cuse last night. Stanford going up on the road, getting that win in the classic ACC battle of Stanford and Syracuse.
Stanford, new member of the ACC after the Pac-12. Saw teams leave the conference. Pac-12 still alive, though. They're getting ready to retool it, with Oregon State and Washington State leading the way. James Peoples on the run.
I almost said something I probably shouldn't have.
What were you going to say?
Well, I was just like, they're expanding. It's going to be like generic. It's like generic medication.
Again, that was Joel Klatt, the former Colorado Buffalo and now college football analyst, throwing that jab out there. Again, to be a little passive aggressive and continue, it must be nice to have, your school not have to worry about brand recognition at all because you decided to hire Deion Sanders and take that risk. But nevertheless, it rubbed me the wrong way, beyond everything else. And then the little jab that's like, oh, it's just generic. It's generic medication. Again, I said medication earlier. I would like all of y'all, most of you are driving, but for those of you at home, I would challenge each and every one of you to go back to your house and tell me what's generic. I think there are some things in life you can't skimp on generics, whether that's, toilet paper, soda, things along that line. And feel free to jump in the YouTube comments or on Twitter to let me know if there's anything I'm missing. But I'm just saying, Beaver fans know they are not the SEC and not the Big Ten. That's fine. But to say the generics don't often work just as good as the name brand stuff. Come on. I mean, again, you're telling me that you pop some, Kroger brand ibuprofen and it's going to feel so much worse than legit Advil. No, I don't see that. So I want to expand upon the team. So clearly, those teams he mentioned, the 4 that were added, didn't jazz him up, but I would continue to say it's still a work in progress, and it's still something that you look at these teams that are out there. I can give you one good reason why each of these teams that are in the mix would not be, quote, generic. So let's start with UNLV. You tell me, Mr. Klatt, what's generic about the Las Vegas market? You've got the LA Raiders, the Las Vegas Raiders, couple decades behind there, Brendan. The Las Vegas Raiders. You've got the Oakland A's that are going to be there by the end of the decade, and ho-hum, Adam Silver keeps hinting that's going to be an NBA team too. I know that has very little to do with, the football and the UNLV aspect. And, we talked to Adam Rittenberg. He mentioned UNLV has been non-starter for some time. I get that. But again, you're talking about TV dollars, TV markets, betting markets. Vegas is the golden goose. Now, after that, I really like Memphis. I think that's arguably the best, kind of group of 5 team that's available and out there. Top growing fan base, we're one of, and they kind of own the city of Memphis. Nothing generic there. You get down the list, I see where he's getting at a little bit. Tulane is a bit interesting to me. They had their run a couple years ago. Now saw their coach go to Houston, but brings a new stadium and a footprint into the South. UTSA, which has been thrown out there, that's University of Texas San Antonio. Not only do you get Texas, not only do you get the Alamo Dome, you also get San Antonio with Wemby Fever, which has pretty much turned San Antonio into a must-watch TV market. So that could be something there. A few more kind of, I would say surprises, but a reason for each of them. Texas State, right off. I mean, Texas State, you don't think about it when you think of UT, you think of TCU, so many others. But right off of the Austin footprint, a growing market, and a relatively brand new stadium. Nevada, easily one of the biggest long shots. Your boy's going to be down there in a couple weeks when Oregon State plays Nevada. I'm very curious to see. I've heard that McKay Stadium and just Nevada's athletic facilities in general are nothing to write home about. But that's been a better basketball program than what Wayne Tinkle and the Beavers have put together in Corvallis. So I think football obviously drives the bus, but you have to consider the other sports as well. And then I think 3 of kind of the long shots, right? You got 2, you got USF, which gets mentioned in there. That's the University of South Florida. You've got a pretty big fish there as far as being able to land in Florida. So that's intriguing. But, nevertheless, I think Joel Klatt's comments are just so indicative of this inferiority complex that Oregon State fans have that I think absolutely is 100% justified. I hear that Joel Klatt clip and I go, so you think you're better than us? Like, it just comes off so just like, oh, well, that's Washington State and Oregon State. We left them for dead, not like they could be relevant. And I just think that's too much of the national media. I mean, it's really cut and dry. The TV networks that played a part in the conference demising. And, I hope Joel gets a chance to walk this back because I would love to see this rebuilt conference ultimately get a chance to, kick some teeth around the college football landscape in the years to come. I could be completely wrong, but this thought was an unnecessary shot at what Chris and I talked about. Like, it's the old Simpsons meme. We've all seen it before. Stop enough. He's dead already. And it's like, do you really need to take that shot, Joel? Like, you're calling an Ohio State, Marshall game. That's not good enough for you. So I think that was just a very unnecessary comment, and it is what it is. But with just a few minutes left before we catch up with TJ Mathewson, want to go back over to Trent Bray and catch the second half of his post-game press conference that he had following Oregon State's win over Purdue. So we'll hear from Trent Bray for a couple minutes, set the stage for TJ Matthewson, who's going to be joining us here in about 10 minutes, talk some more Beavers, and then ultimately the RCM mailbag to close out the show. So we'll go ahead and listen to head coach Trent Bray here.
We are capable of playing shutdown defense. We got to we should have closed it out tonight, wish we would have, but we're capable of doing that against big-time talent, and then the resiliency of our players, their ability to not back down or blink when things go bad.
Coach, a wild pick six there. How would you describe the weirdness of the play, and then just starting off after last week's defensively, what that did for you?
Yeah, I think it was an energizer for sure. I think early on, we don't get the 4th and 1, we get the turnover, and then the pick six. I think that was just huge for their confidence and to light a fire under our team and spark.
Trent, you kind of mentioned against a big time team. Obviously Purdue's not expected to be great in the Big Ten, but nevertheless a Big Ten team, Big Ten size in the trenches in particular. How big was that to kind of bounce back this week against another team that wasn't necessarily like a step down in competition?
Yeah, I think anytime you play these type of teams, or out of conference, so to speak, you want to represent your conference and who you are. It was just great because again, it was a good opponent that we played really well against, and that's the biggest thing.
Kind of piggybacking off Ronald's thought, 4 weeks in, your schedule breaks kind of uniquely this year, 4, 4, and 4 with kind of buys in between. Are you where you thought you would be kind of going into the bye week, and what's going to be kind of some important things for you guys going into this bye?
Yeah, I think being 3-1 is good. Obviously, we want to be 4-0, but we're happy with where we're at, and especially the progression. I feel that we've become a better football team over these 4 weeks, and so now we get a chance to get healthy a little bit. Get rest, and then go another 4 games. So I like where we're at. There's still more out there for us, but I'm happy with the progression.
Pretty aggressive on a couple of 4th down calls tonight, especially the one on the opening drive in your own territory. What's the thought process there, and is that a decision you might continue to think of in the same way in the future?
Absolutely. The thought process is to go win. And so, like we actually, as a team, we watched a bunch of different scenarios on Friday nights, and one of them was Kansas State, Arizona, 4th and 1, backed up in their own territory. They convert, they end up driving down and scoring a touchdown. So that's 7 points that wouldn't be on the board. I feel great about, in those situations, our ability to get them. Are we going to be 100%? No. But I feel great about our guys' chances to go get it, so we're going to take a risk, but it's an education.
That was Oregon State head coach Trent Bray post-game. And again, I think one of the most interesting things there, and there weren't a whole lot of criticisms from Oregon State in that game, but one of the more interesting ones was the decision to go for it, 4th and 1, your own 25, first drive of the game. There were a lot of Beaver fans, Trent Bray had to be wanting to walk that back. No, Trent Bray doubled and tripled down at the tables and is like, yeah, I'd do that again. Easy to say when your defense causes a turnover, but we'll be getting TJ Matthews' thoughts here coming up on the other side of the break. You've got Rip City Mornings with Brendan Slaughter here on a Monday. Welcoming you back into Rip City Mornings. The music seems apropos as our next guest is a Seattle native, TJ Mathewson, coming to us from Cajo and Corvallis. My good friend, my homie. TJ, what's going on, man? How are you?
Good morning, Brendan. It is good to be back on with you. Second time's the charm, it seems like.
Yeah, it's like I've kind of been saying all day. It is 3 hours to get Brendan Slaughter's uninterrupted opinions, which I appreciate.
Well, I'm glad people want those, Brendan. That's really important. I think holding something of value to others is a skill that not many can match, and I'm glad you have that here on this platform.
Oh, it's been great, man. It's been a fun couple mornings, and I'll say this, even just compared to the first time I was jumping on with you, life is a lot more, things kind of go hand in hand when you have as much to talk about as we have to talk about after a sports weekend. And I want to start with you because, last time I saw you, you were giving me dap heading out of the press box of a Oregon State game that was well in hand, going to run the KEGO pregame or postgame show after the game down there in Corvallis. Just a starkly different 2 weeks, TJ. I mean, I caught up with ESPN college football writer Adam Rittenberg in the first hour, and Adam was kind of, Adam is a pretty, middle of the road as far as not gonna, pipe your team up, not gonna, come at your team too much. But I was impressed with kind of how he was like, regardless of how good Purdue was going to be, that's a team that is in a conference that didn't want you, that you went and kicked the tail out of. That still is something.
It is something. I think someone brought this up on the postgame show as well. I don't know how much stock you put it. Like, yeah, Purdue is in technicality in the Big Ten. Like, they're in the Big Ten because they're a good basketball school, right? Like, they've had some good football years under Jeff Brom, but like you and I both know, Brendan, they're not in that conference because of their football program. But let's just start and make that clear. Like, they're clearly in a rebuild, and even when they're at their best, they're on the second or third tier of Big Ten schools. However, I mean, it sets the bar for quality of team that is in said conference like that, which is nice. But ultimately, I don't know how much that matters at this very moment because the Beavers and Cougs have, their future home, at least that they've set and that they've worked on very hard that has come to light over the last couple of weeks. So, that's almost less of a focus, and now it's more of a focus on just getting quality football wins. And what you saw at Research Stadium Saturday was a quality football win. You could have looked at the first 3 weeks of the Beaver season and saw 2-1. Pretty realistically, I think you could have got a pretty uniform reaction from many Beaver fans out there that 2-1 was the record in the first 3 weeks. And then Purdue would be a bit of a measuring stick. Vegas was sort of in between on the game, and the line ended at 2.5. So it was almost a pick 'em this weekend in the terms of, I'd say, the neutral parties of Vegas, and Oregon State proved it right. It's not like Purdue, I'd say, didn't belong on the field. The score looks, I think, a little bit more lopsided than some facets of the game where Purdue didn't execute on 2 fourth downs that were crucial. They turned the ball over a couple of times with prime scoring opportunities. Like some of these little things that Oregon State was able to capitalize on that Purdue didn't, that led to the score being a little bit more lopsided than it was. But that's what good teams do. They capitalize. And I think the Beavers showed a step towards being what we could call a good team on Saturday.
Totally agree on whole fronts. And again, joined by TJ Mathewson, KEGO radio down in Corvallis, and also works with me over at beaversedge.com. TJ, I'm curious too, because I want to talk a little bit about just the narrative around the Pac realignment. There were some rumors. We may hear something yesterday that never came to fruition. I think with a bye week, the opportunity to drop that news would certainly be ideal. But before we get into that, I'm curious, did you hear Joel Klatt's clip from over this weekend that seems to be going pretty viral?
Yeah, I did.
So, I went scorched earth on that last hour, TJ, and I challenged everybody because, again, for those who didn't hear the clip, Joel Klatt pretty much was, throwing some shade at the Pac-12 and saying, okay, it's a bunch of generics. TJ, I would like you to go into your home and tell me how many generic things you find that are just fine and dandy. I made the comparison to, if I'm looking at Advil and I see Kroger brand ibuprofen and it's $5-6 cheaper, I'm going with the Kroger brand. So I just don't know in that situation, somebody who has very few ties to the West Coast outside of Colorado and calling a Marshall Ohio State game. Maybe it's just me, but that felt just very unnecessary jab. And I'm like, stay in your lane, bro.
You also got to remember he's the number one analyst for Fox, and Fox is a big reason the Beavers and Cougars are where they are right now.
It's true. Very true.
And, to be honest, digesting a lot of what Joel Klatt has talked about over the last, handful of years that I've really paid closer and closer attention to college football. Actually, he probably, I'm going to guess in the moment, probably misspoke. But he also, again, he understands who he works for, right? And he understands what kind of audience is receiving that kind of information, and understands he'll probably, it's not that big a deal. I actually don't think he meant all that bad. I really don't. But regardless, it's all what we're essentially doing right now is we're just interpreting what he said. Like you said, it's the name of the store brand stuff's not that bad. The generic brand, it's really not that bad. We're sitting here just trying to sort of interpret it, but the only way to change that narrative is to go out there and now win said conference and have a seat at the table in the college football playoff and get an automatic bid and go win some games. That will certainly switch that around.
No, totally. And I guess and you're probably right, TJ. I just looked at it from the perspective of being a little bit more emotional on the Oregon State side, and it kind of, reminded me, just a little bit of, like you said, I'm not saying he was responsible, but his company that he works for certainly played a part in where the conference is. And, it's kind of like, we're not your deal anymore. So it's like, again, just the fact that you take specific time to mention the Pac-12 in a Big Ten broadcast makes very little sense to me. It felt like kind of a calculated little jab, and I think at this point it's kind of like the I mentioned it earlier when I was talking to Chris Burkhart, was like, it seems like it's already like this old Simpsons meme, TJ. It's like, stop, it's already dead. Like it's like you don't need to do anymore. They're doing their thing. Go live in your hoity-toity, Big 10, Big 12, all that. So, again, there's definitely a you think you're better than us mentality with a lot of Oregon State fans. 100%. And I think Washington State, too. This very easily, is a shot at Washington State, too. I don't want to sit there and say it as well. And I think, Washington State fans and maybe even some Seattle radio, if they found this particular clip, TJ, may have jumped into it as well. But, moving along to the game itself, definitely a bit of an odd game in the sense of it was just so starkly different from last week. And, I think there's a lot of reasons for that. I think there's the aspect that it was a late game instead of a 12:30 game where the crowd seemed to be a little bit sleepy. I myself know it took me about 12:15 to kind of get all the engines firing up that morning, TJ. So it was that part of it, and then Oregon obviously slicing and dicing, doing whatever they want, playing a near perfect game. But, now that they're able to bounce back against Purdue, and really that game was in the balance early on. How big of a play did Zacchaeus Sayas make? And do you think we will ever see a play like that live with our own two peepers ever again?
No, I was using the reference in the press box. I think I might have mentioned it to you during the game, that it's almost like how they say when you watch a baseball game, you'll see something you've never seen before. Well, I think that applies in this sense too. I just think the odds of a football, a non-uniform shaped object bouncing back in the same exact direction it came off of someone's, I think, Achilles, right into your breadbasket to score is unlikely. And that's the kind of, if the Beavers are going to have a great season, they're going to win some of these games that Vegas might not think they should. They're going to need some bounces like that. That's exactly what we're talking about. Instead, it should have just been a 2nd down and 10. Instead, it was a touchdown. So you're going to need stuff like that to bounce your way. And a couple times that happened to the Beavers on Saturday, and I'm sure they're very thankful for that.
100%. And that was one of the things that we mentioned. I can't remember if it was this pod or this most recent pod where it was just Ryan and I, but we kind of talked about how just the differences, like Idaho State, TJ, you can kind of remember we had some similar thoughts about the defense, and then they got just a massive lick on their quarterback. I don't think it was a sack, but it was just a huge hit. The crowd got riled up. And considering that Oregon State's 2 drives went nowhere offensively, to start the game scoring like that, go up 7-up on your defense, that was some of the loudest the crowd I heard all night. Obviously, the game still was in the balance, for a bit longer, but there were numerous opportunities where I think Oregon State seized momentum and really rode the crowd. And likewise, I know Purdue's taken a lot of flack. TJ, how many other teams would have just folded up and been like, it is not our night? I give Purdue credit. They fought to the bitter end.
Well, they fought a little bit more than they did the week prior against Notre Dame. I think that that was pretty.
That was historically
clear.
bad. Historically bad.
It just, they tried, and they certainly had a lot of success running on the outside, and that's where the Beavers are going to really have to clean some things up. I mean, you could interpret what the Beavers did on defense and sort of trying to hold Purdue at bay a couple of different ways. You could say, well, glass half full, they essentially just took away the passing game and let the running game, do whatever it needed to. Or on the other side, it's like, well, the run defense needs to get cleaned up. But regardless, I think even though Purdue didn't back down, I don't think the game never really felt in doubt after the Beavers went up, I think 14-0. It felt like the way they play offense and the way they ball control, it'd be really hard for Purdue to come back. And frankly, Hudson Card did not look good enough, not as good as Dylan Gabriel to sort of march them back.
No, and I think, we kind of saw Hudson Card's limitations as a passer. Obviously, he was able to connect on a few throws. Couple, I believe the one to Max Clare was probably a bit of a busted coverage, but nevertheless, still a nice game. Let's talk a little bit about the criticisms, though, TJ, because, again, it was a positive bounce back, but you still have to, and it was one of the first things Trent Bray mentioned in his postgame, that run defense is a problem. And it's less of a problem when you had San Diego State, who, I just think in that game, the way it was weird, right? I expected them to run, their ground game a lot more than they did. The Beavers kind of bottled them up early, and then they kind of went away with it. But Idaho State, Oregon, and Purdue, all 3 at home, TJ, they found running room. And I believe Purdue had 286 ground yards this last week. Again, I talked about it in my post-game breakdown video. Outside of Oregon, TJ, and maybe Washington State, maybe a guy or two on Boise State, this was the biggest offensive and defensive line you were going to face this year. Like, flat out. Like, we went through up on the game card. Purdue didn't have an offensive lineman less than 310. Most of their backups were pushing 300 pounds, and that's just the benefit you have of being a Big Ten team. So going back to that conversation, yes, Purdue's not going to be good, but will they sneak a couple Big Ten wins simply for the fact that Hudson Card will have a game and they have skill position talent to go toe-to-toe with teams? Sure, and that's what kind of had me nervous going into this game is like if Oregon State, TJ, did not play a good game, Purdue was still capable of winning this game.
I think if people haven't looked at the box score closely enough of how Purdue stacks up, they gained a yard more per play than the Beavers did. It's not like they just, like you said, they didn't just roll over. They, in fact, if you look at it at some different stats, they, in fact, performed better offensively and better at gaining yardage than the Beavers did. It's just a few handful of plays in the game that they didn't execute. And if the Beavers had messed up, then I think we could be having a different discussion here today, and Purdue could have won a game on the road. But unfortunately, Purdue showed its flaws as a football team. It showed why they lost by 59 points to Notre Dame a week prior, and why they came on the road and made some just crucial mistakes on the road that allowed the Beavers to come out and win the football game. So there's plenty to clean up for the Beavs. You know, the run defense is needing to get fixed. They're going to face some really good running teams. I mean, I'm especially thinking of the final 2 weeks of the season against Washington State and John Mateer, and then Ashton Genty and Boise State the day after Thanksgiving. It's going to be like, those are going to be some real tests for this run defense. If they can't improve before then, it is going to be a long day.
And I also have to say with that, TJ, the closer and closer we get to it, I know you, me, Ryan, we've talked about it on the pod. You are a real one as far as a Beaver fan. If you were going to do Thanksgiving, hit the road and go to Boise, or if you're going to do Thanksgiving and fly out, like, TJ, it's not even possible to fly in that morning for a 9 a.m. kickoff. Like, credit to any Beaver fan that makes it out to Boise. You know what I mean?
It would be, well, you'd have to just spend Thanksgiving in Boise. Yeah. That would be it. You'd have to go have, you're not getting a home-cooked Thanksgiving meal that day. You're going out to eat.
Exactly. Just a couple more things with TJ Mathewson, my good buddy from KJO down in Corvallis, also works with us at beaversedge.com. Oregon State 3-1, entering the bye week. Just two more things for you, TJ. What'd you think of Darius Clemens?
Limited. I would have liked to see him more, but I understand why they didn't play him a whole lot. There's the one drive right before the half. They emphasized him. They made him the vocal point of the offense. And I think that was important. We saw a couple of his strengths on display. You know, he is bigger than most of the defensive backs he'll line up against, and you can utilize his combination of speed and size. I mean, they threw him that deep crosser once and let him sort of run across the field, and that's almost just something where you catch the ball in stride. He can break a tackle off a smaller defensive back or a safety, and he can gain some extra yards after that. And he just brings an element that they don't have in the wide receiver room. They haven't utilized the tight ends at all in the passing game. The other wide receivers aren't as physically imposing as Darius Clemens. So the ability to have him back and have him healthy, I think, is just immense. I was chuckling looking across the sideline and watching Clemens standing there on the sideline next to the rest of the wide receiver. It's like, oh wow, he is like that much bigger than everybody else. This dude's going to make quite a difference. So they can just keep him healthy, and they can keep him in the rhythm of the offense. But on top of just having Clemens, they're going to need to get him the ball too, like physically. You're going to need to see more from the quarterbacks for Oregon State to get Clemens and utilize most of his skill set.
Oh, yeah. No, I wholeheartedly agree with everything you said there, Tej. And I think, that was the biggest thing. And I remember you and our good buddy Ryan Harlan, who also works for beaversedge.com, spent more time at practices than I did throughout the course of August. But the few that I was able to come down and see, you guys probably thought I sounded like a broken record. But I looked at that guy and I said, that guy, and I don't mean this negatively, but every now and again, there is a physical guy at Oregon State where you look and you go, Oregon State's not supposed to have a whole bunch of those guys. And, I think Clemens kind of fits in that mix, considering he's a national champion. I know he didn't play very much at Michigan, but he dominated a spring game that they had a couple years back. The potential is 100% there. Last thing I want to ask you, TJ, then we'll go ahead and close out. Appreciate your time here on a Monday morning. Ultimately, the conference, there were some rumors that we might hear some more conference expansion stuff yesterday. That didn't come to fruition. I'm no timing expert, but it seems like it would be really good news during a bye week, TJ. Do you think they could get something done this week?
I think today would be the day. Monday news drop. Monday news drop of a bye week. I think that would be, if we're just talking about timing and when the best time for news is, it's essentially right now, Brendan. It'll probably be in, I don't know.
As soon as I get off the air, right?
Yeah, 30 minutes. It's probably right when you get off the air. I think that would make a lot of sense. Well, there is more coming. We just don't know what exactly is coming yet. So you got to You gotta just buckle up and wait, because once the conference had decided to go the direction it had, it needed to keep adding. Everyone knew it needed to keep adding, and it sounds like some of that news will come out this week.
All right, TJ, we got about a minute left. I teased you, and I would not have done so without giving you a quick little minute to do it. How excited are you about your 3-0 Hawks?
Yeah, they look pretty good, don't they? Oh, my goodness.
I'm just saying, man, I'm sitting here kind of surprised. I'm seeing some injuries across the division. I'm like, Mike McDonald's got more than Seattle Coffee brewing up there in Renton.
Yeah, it's the concepts of a 2-game lead is, I will say, is very foreign. Looking at the rest of the NFC West and seeing the Niners at 1-2 and seeing the Rams at 1-2 and seeing the Cardinals at 1-2 is a little weird. It's 3 weeks of watching this coaching staff is very, very refreshing. It's buttoned up, it's detailed, and it's effective. It's worked. The players are buying in. They're schematically sound. It looks like an up-to-date, innovative, thoughtful scheme on both sides of the football. And think of the compare and contrast, Brendan, where former Seahawks offensive coordinator Shane Waldron is now in Chicago. He's getting a lot of flack.
That's true.
With Caleb Williams and company. And the Seahawks decided to not bring him back, and he went to Chicago instead. And you had that JSN clip that went viral this offseason where they're like, hey, can you talk to us about Shane Waldron? He's like, tells you everything you need to know about what the coaching staff sort of used to be. And now with, Ryan Grubb, who had proved himself at Washington, and Mike McDonald and his schemes in Baltimore, it's amazing. And I didn't even mention Geno Smith, who's playing out of his mind, despite the fact he has 3 offensive linemen that are really struggling to block for him. And he's still hanging there in the pocket, and he's delivering. He looks awesome. I mean, he's just getting better and better and better.
It's been awesome to see from the Seahawks here early on, and one of the great surprises, I think, them obviously 3-1, but my 2 big surprises were them and the New Orleans Saints prior to yesterday's loss. But man, it seems to be coming up all 12s in Seattle right now, and I know TJ, considering your fantasy team is loaded with Seahawks, you've done a little better the last couple weeks.
Yeah, it's been a pretty good week. It's been a pretty good week. And I remembered all the rules this week. Which is
This is true, too. If you know, TJ and I might have to drop that on the next edition of the Edge podcast. Check that out at beaversedge.com. TJ, KGO Radio in Corvallis, also with Beavers Edge. Appreciate you, my man. We will be catching up, obviously, this week. Beavers got a bye week, and then obviously going from there. So appreciate you, man, and we'll talk soon.
Sounds good, Brendan. Enjoy the rest of the show.
Blazers deserve to be bid over. But hey, I'll take it. Welcoming you back to Rip City Mornings. Final segment of the final hour coming up here. Nothing like a little in sync to bring you back into the action. You know, being in the cusp of millennial and Gen Z, I can bop back either way. Being 28, man, NSYNC still hits. So that is something that Justin and I have in common, as we both love love to hear that boy band from the early 2000s. Big shout out to all of our guests today. Adam Rittenberg in the first hour. Really appreciate him getting up early, even in his central time zone, to chat some ball with us. Chris Burkhart got the Butcher and the Slaughter in hour 2. That was awesome as well. And then just caught up with TJ Mathewson just a few minutes ago. So definitely make sure to check out those interviews at ripcityradio.com. Let's go ahead and open up the RCM mailbag, where Michael Schacker's got some questions for me.
Well, I got to know, Brendan. Pac-12 is going to be 12 teams again. If it's going to be 12 teams again, what are the other 6?
So can I give you the 6 that I want selfishly, and then the 6 that I think we'll have? So selfishly, let's look here. We're talking selfishly for Brendan's road trips. So Hawaii absolutely needs to be in the conference. Need to get UNLV. That covers Hawaii, Vegas. Why not throw in Reno? There's another one. Give me a couple schools in Texas. Maybe UTSA, San Antonio. And then I'm all about USF, man. Get me a every other year trip to Tampa, Florida. My goodness. Now, take away Brendan's goals aside, Hawaii will never join this conference. And there were some other teams in there that will never join the conference either. Ultimately, I think what's going to happen, Tulane and Memphis will be the teams that are added in. They will be the first to come into the fold. The question is, when you do that, then you have to create a semi-pod on that side, whether it be Mountain or Central Time or push in the Eastern Standard Time Zone. So if it was me, I would seriously look at the Texas teams. I would look at a team like USF. UTEP doesn't really do it for me, but again, Texas team, Texas State, there are some more options. And then, worst case scenario, I think it's worth it. If you can't get UNLV without getting Nevada, it's worth it, in my opinion. Let me tell you why real quick. Las Vegas, Las Vegas, Las Vegas. When I was a kid, Las Vegas, this taboo town of sin and gamblers and this and that. Now that I'm in my mid-adult life, it's like Vegas is no longer that way. It's looked at as a growing sports town. The market's getting bigger. You've got eons of people who have decided, yeah, California's too expensive. We're going to move to Nevada. And you've started to see a pretty big population grow there. Reno, I've heard, is growing quite a bit too. Jury's still out. I'll let you know how Reno is in a couple weeks, folks. But again, to get Nevada and get UNLV, you almost have to consider Nevada as well. So, yeah, that's how I ultimately think that would shake out, Shacker.
All right. Well, I got the tape. I recorded you. We'll see how accurate you are. And they have this all figured out, and I hope it is 12 teams. All right. Well, we got a little over a minute. Let's wrap this up. But what is the best generic item that you buy? Be it a dairy product, cleaning supplies, all those generic items you were describing. Is there any that you buy? Is there one that you just don't mind, or it's just as good as the regular?
Yeah, so Advil for sure. That one starts. Kirkland brand Advil. Always go to Costco. Still ride for the liquid gels. I'm all about that liquid gels, but Kirkland's smart, man. They make their own liquid gels. So medicines and things like that, I think, are pretty close. But then, Shacker, on the other side, there are some that are sacrilege. Like, you try to put like just generic cola next to Coca-Cola, I'm going to fight you. So, same what I would say with cheap toilet paper versus good toilet paper. I would fight you. So it's a very unique spot to kind of figure out what works, what doesn't. I don't mind name brand cereal, stuff like that. I mean, I don't know, Shacker, in today's world, I can't speak for everybody at this station, but your boy's trying to save a buck every chance he get. I don't know if you noticed, inflation's pretty high these days.
All right. Well, I have no problem with the yogurt. But that's the show.
And that'll go ahead and wrap it up on this edition of Rip City Mornings. Big shout out. There you go. I didn't know what our timing was exactly, but that's okay.
Where's the stop stream? Why does... Oh, here we go. It's over there. And, okay.